Hey, this is Robert Phoenix, and welcome to the Sunday night live stream. Tonight we're going to be talking about the forecast for the summer astrologically, even though we're pretty much into the summer for, well, about a month now, officially. But it is hot. The heat is on. We have the new moon in Leo. We have Mars in Leo. We have Sun in Leo. There's a lot of Leo happening. And a lot of the Leo is going to be around when we have the eclipse on the 21st of August, which we're going to talk about on tonight's show. How is everybody? It's been a while since I've done this. Man, it is really hot here in Texas, and not only is it hot, but it's really humid. So I'm feeling a little damp due to the intense humidity here. But you know what? We soldier on. We go through the experience. And I've usually have a better makeup person at Gaia. Which is Suzanne, and fortunately she's not here in Austin, Texas. So what's going on? How is everybody holding out as America sort of falls apart at the seams, or so it seems? Before we get into the forecast for the summer, of course, we'll sort of riff a little bit just about the big picture. And tomorrow, Jared Kushner goes before the special council that's being headed up by one Robert Mueller, and it's going to be really probably pretty uninteresting, to be honest with you, because Jared Kushner, well, he gets his own private meeting with Mueller, unlike Jeff Sessions, who had to bare his soul in front of others. Kushner gets apparently a special privilege of being able to talk discreetly, and I think we all know why that is. It's because Jerry is intensely connected with some people in very high places. Secret Agent 666. That's what I call him. Look, I don't go back and watch a lot of my stuff. I don't go back and listen to a lot of my stuff. Sometimes I do. But apparently, I'd have to go back and watch this. Maybe I'll do this over vacation since I still have my subscription to Gaia. Apparently, my piece with Regina was edited, and I was talking about Kushner and his relationship with Trump's natal Pluto in the 12th house, and how Kushner's true node is right on Trump's Pluto. And this was months ago. I mean, so we were there February. I was there in February. And I basically was saying that Kushner was the power behind the throne. That he would be the de facto president, and it's kind of unfolded like that. So I'm not sure if they actually edited that out, and if they did edit it out, I'm not entirely sure why they did that either. So I'm going to go back and check it out. But tomorrow, Prince Jared gets his behind the scenes questioning by Robert Mueller and the special counsel. Real interesting article in the New York Times. I rarely read the New York Times, but this one was pretty good. It's by Frank Bruni. You can look at it. You can look it up. And he talks about how Kushner seems to always get some kind of special dispensation, some kind of pass. It's really interesting, that they're sort of focusing on Jared just a little bit. And you still won't get to hear his voice. You see, I mean, that's the other thing, right? Nobody's really ever heard this guy. No comment. That's it. Basically, no comment. And not a whole lot more than that. So we're going to get into what's happening for the rest of the summer. Mars just went into Leo, and that's, for the Mars cycles have been pretty intense. I mean, I remember last year that the Mars cycles were very intense as well, but Mars and the lunar cycles. Now, we just had the full moon in the last full moon we had, which was in Capricorn, okay? That Capricorn full moon, well, it has nothing to do with Mars, was pretty intense. And it did have something to do with the Mars in Chester Bennington's chart. I'm going to talk a little bit about Chester Bennington and his chart and the relationship between Bennington and quite possibly John Podesta. This is going to be, you know, people have been looking at the connection between Bennington, Chris Cornell, child abuse, sex trafficking, and first of all, if you put a picture, and I just did a post on my website, if you put a picture side by side of Bennington and John Podesta, you'd be blown away. Maybe I should just grab one. Let me grab one in real time. When I do this, sometimes the audio gets a little, the video gets a little screwy on the YouTube side. Let's do this, Bennington, and Podesta. I'm going to throw this picture up so you guys get a visual of what these guys look like together. So, Snopes is in fine form, absolutely fine form, telling us that there is absolutely no connection whatsoever between the death. This is a good one. Here we go. This one's going to give you the. He didn't kill himself. He was already dead before he hung himself. I have proof. Ooh. Oh, his wife says she has proof. How about that? Here's the tweet from his wife. This is kind of breaking news here. This is on July 21st. To Linda Bennington. He didn't kill himself. He was already dead. I think she meant to say dead before he hung himself. I have proof. 104 retweets. Wow. All right, so just to give you a visual here, let's add an image. This is going to be 1.5. Oh, here we go. So just to give you an idea, let's just pop this up here. Here is images of Chester Bennington and John Podesta. Just eyeball that for a second. Now, it's pretty obvious that Chester has the bigger ears. But Podesta's got some, he's got some flappers as well, doesn't he? I think that there's certainly some visual connection here. Doesn't it seem like that? So I did a little bit of astrological forensics, and I did some other searching, and I did not, when I first started to get into this on Friday, I had no idea that Chester Bennington was the son of a cop in Arizona. And his father was in charge of investigating child molestation and trafficking. That's what his dad did. His dad was in the business on the police side. And Bennington said that he was molested from the age of 7 to 13 by an adult friend, an older friend. Man. So I looked at the charts. Now we have Chester Bennington's chart. Maybe I'll just find that. I think let me see if I can bring it up here. Let's go Chester Bennington chart, astrological chart. Hold on. Astrological chart. All right, here we go. By the way, his supposed suicide is now being looked at as a murder. It's being reopened as a murder case. So here's what I was using for the chart on the site. It's right here. Let me just bring this up so everybody can see it. Let me add this image. ZF. Okay. Browse. Here we go. Okay, so here's Bennington's chart. Now, what we want to pay specific attention to is Saturn. Can you see Saturn? The H, and it's in the 8th house. And I want to read you what Liz Green has to say about Saturn in the 8th house. Let me just find it here. I'm just going to my site. And I'll throw up John Podesta's chart as well. So this is what Liz Green has to say. So I can find this thing here. Okay, this is what she says. She says this is about Saturn in the 8th. This placement may signify the death of the father, or he is emotionally cold and rejecting. Furthermore, the environment in which the individual lives may show sexual problems between the parents. In the worst case, beatings and assault can occur, which leave deeper emotional scars than any other Saturn placement. The father may also be possessive and domineering, and his early death may teach the child a painful lesson of letting go. Now, that said, his father didn't die, unless, of course, he had a different father. Now, when we take, let me get Podesta's chart here. Now, there is no chart for John Podesta. So what I had to do is I had to rectify the chart. So I'm going to bring this up here now. And we're going to bring it on up. Let's see what we got here. Right here. So I had to put this thing together and rectify it, because all we have with Podesta is his date of birth. And let me make these a little bit smaller here so I can shrink it. There we go. Little image manipulation. Let's bring this chart over here. And this is John Podesta's. At least how I rectified it, okay? Because we don't have a birth date and time for him. We have a birth date but no time. Here we go. Right there. Okay. So what we want to look at is Saturn. And you can see Saturn in Podesta's first house. Now, I set him to being a Virgo rising with Saturn fairly close to the ascendant. Because when you look at Podesta, right, he looks very much like a Saturnian character in terms of his facial expression. And, you know, we're talking kind of, here, let's see if I can, well, I'll do it at the end. You know, he's kind of craggy and sort of, you know, slightly uneven, which is very Saturnine. And also what I was trying to do, or looking to do, based on what we theoretically might know about John Podesta is Pluto in the 12th house. So we're dealing with Pluto and Leo in this hidden area of the chart. And I also wanted to somehow get this Mars, Mercury in the 5th house in Aquarius. I've got to fix that in the piece. But this is the house of children as well, the 5th house. And Mars Aquarius, Mars Mercury Aquarius is this conjunction is rather cold, to be honest with you. Aquarius is an air sign. So all the fire is removed. And here it's in Leo's house. So even though Mars and to some degree, well, even the Sun and Jupiter might enjoy the residence, might enjoy the stay in the 5th house, Mars is it's fairly cold. What do we got here? Mars is fairly cold. Aquarius is incredibly detached. And it's not really doing anything else with the rest of the chart. There's a square to the moon, and he's got that moon in Taurus, and here's the true node in the 8th house at the very beginning of Taurus. But I wanted to show the 5th house, which is the house of children, having a lot of activity, but particularly the Mars-Mercury conjunction in Aquarius, which I think has the potential of being without much of a conscience. You know, we like to think of Aquarius as being incredibly high-minded, utopianistic, but in this instance, it may not live up to its truly democratic and fraternal standards. Let's put it that way. And then there's the inconjunct, which goes all the way across to Saturn, which means there is a relationship between these two planets, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, which represents hierarchies. Hierarchies. And it's also in Virgo, right? Which is innocence. And what do we think of children? We think of them as being innocent. Here's Saturn, you know, just slightly behind the veil of the ascendant in the 12th house, and this kind of slightly cruel conjunction of Mars, Mercury, without being softened up at all in any other part of the chart, in the inconjunct with Saturn, a relationship between the two that is invisible, meaning non-trackable, non-traceable. But what I was really looking at was, in this chart, was the Saturn placement in Chester Bennington's chart. So if you see Saturn over here in the 12th house, in Chester Bennington's chart, it's up here in the 10th house. That's where so he would literally have John Podesta's Saturn in his 10th house. Now this regardless of whether Podesta's a Virgo rising or whatever rising sign is, this is his Saturn. And as such, it is right up there in the 10th house. Okay? Now what does that mean? Let's go back to my piece. I'll just read you the paragraph. Details on Podesta's chart are difficult to come by, as one might imagine. So in order to cast a chart, we have to rectify his time. I chose 8:55 p.m. for 1/8/49 in Chicago, Illinois. There's that Chicago again. That's where Hillary Clinton was born. The reason I chose 8:55 p.m. is that Pluto and Leo is in the 12th house, for obvious reasons. But also, a look at Podesta reveals the craggy visage that can be associated with Saturn on the ascendant, and in this case, it is in Virgo. Also looking for clues around unusual relationships with children, we see both Mars and Mercury in Aquarius in the 5th house, the house of children. The inconjunct with Saturn in Virgo at the end of the 12th indicates a hidden connection relationship between Mars, Mercury, relating and communicating through radical Aquarius. Mars is much more violent in that house, by the way, than Venus would be. And Saturn, hierarchies. Virgo is innocence and purity. Aquarius is rebellious and overturns established orders. There's an invisible trail between these two aspects. But is there any way that a chart can determine paternity? In the natal chart, if a person has Saturn in the 10th, it's often a sign of the absent father, or a father that places such incredibly high standards on the individual. It can also indicate a rise in the eye of the public and then a precipitous fall. With the absent father theme in mind, John Podesta's Saturn in Virgo is in Bennington's 10th house. We've already seen Bennington's own Saturn in Cancer in the 8th house, which is where Pennington's Saturn is. This is what I read you what Liz Green said. So we have Podesta's Saturn in Pennington's 10th and Saturn in his 8th. These are especially troubling aspects surrounding the father. Is it enough to indict Podesta as a missing father? Not likely. But given some strong physical mirroring, the fact that Bennington has a strange past associated with abuse, including a father that was a detective who worked in child abuse, we're in the gray area of symbolic speculation, where there's enough ciphers to not deny it in an outright dismissal. So if we look at the absent father theme, even though Chester Bennington's own Saturn, which is we've determined in the 8th house, is there in the 8th and not in the 10th, that's John Podesta's Saturn in Chester Bennington's 10th house. Now, Podesta's Saturn is at 6 degrees. So what do we see here? We see, and I'm just seeing this now for the first time, we see Podesta's Saturn at 6 degrees, and it's in opposition with Chester Bennington's Venus in Pisces at 7 degrees. So we have a Venus-Saturn opposition. When you get into oppositions, right, we get into connection and relationship. Interesting. All right, so let's remove that. Yes. And let's remove that. Yes. So take a look at Podesta. He's got those craggy, sort of Capricornian sorts of features. You see what I'm saying? They're not, you know, when you get into like Saturn on the ascendant, we're not talking, not always. I mean, it can be, look, there are other aspects in the chart. Not everybody is always going to look craggy with Saturn on the ascendant. Some people might have, you know, Venus in Libra, and it might soften everything up. You know, there's other pieces to the chart. But in this case, you know, I really think that this Virgo ascendant and Saturn there fits Podesta. The similarity is kind of mind-blowing, don't you think? And I don't have to do a lot of astrological forensics. That's Saturn. Podesta's Saturn in Bennington's 10th house is a telltale sign. Absolute telltale sign. There we go. Let's remove that. Hey, it's me again. What do you know? So let's get into some other stuff. We got some things happening coming at you this summer. We already talked about Mars and Leo. And we have a new moon in Leo. We're starting the week off on a new moon. And I'm going on vacation. And I'm happy about that. I'll be unplugging for roughly 7 days. And let's just say it's a well-needed vacation. It's a long time coming. Long time coming. Just going to sit on a beach and let the sun rain down upon my back. That's what I'm seeing. I might even bring my vacation cap. There we go. Look like a southern farmer now. Take that off. So yeah, we got the new moon in Leo. We got Mars in Leo. Hey, look, summer is roaring now, right? It's roaring. Really interesting. I started to watch. Talk about astrological. There's a great series that Netflix has produced called Last Chance U. I highly recommend it. It's season 2. You can go back and watch season 1. And it's about a college, a junior college in a place called Scuba, S-C-O-O-B-A, Scuba, Mississippi. And it's where these college athletes, these football players, basically a lot of them are washouts from other schools. Some aren't. Some are just guys there doing their thing, going to play for scuba. But some of these, there are a number of these guys that got blown out at other programs. And it's an absolutely fascinating show. I mean, Netflix really hit a home run with this because it really communicates this message of the South and these kids and these parents and football and what it means and, the depth of like faith and Christianity. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. Now, there's this one young guy, and this is going to bring in some of the astrological stuff here. So there's this one guy named Dakota Allen. And Dakota Allen is one of the best players on their team. And he used to play at Texas Tech. And he got involved in a burglary ring. And he had, he got mixed up with the wrong guys, got kicked out of Tech. He winds up in this school, East Mississippi Community College in Scuba, becomes their best player on defense, but he also goes through a religious conversion. And I'm sharing this with you because this guy is right there at the edge of the first sort of wave of Pluto and Sagittarius. And he's going through this religious conversion, which I think the Pluto and Sag kids are going to experience. And I think the Pluto and Sag kids are going to rediscover religion on their own terms. That's my sense. It's a really interesting story. You watch them get baptized and everything. But then there's this other kid whose name is Cameron Carter, and I feel sorry. I really feel sorry for the young man on so many levels. He's completely possessed by drugs like Ritalin and all these other, antidepressants and stuff to deal with his ADHD. I mean, he's just in this cloud, this chemical cloud throughout the entire show, and nobody can reach him. It's because he's in this pharmaceutical fog. But what's really interesting is that if you look on his forearm, he's got the symbol for Pisces on his forearm, and he really comes across in many ways like an archetypal Pisces. He feels as though he's always being the scapegoat. And what is his biggest challenge? Well, it's drugs. Legal and illegal. And he said, I hate these drugs. I'd stop taking them, but I can't. And when I did stop taking them, I started smoking weed, which made me feel better, but it's illegal. So I got busted and I had to leave school. So this guy's in a rock and a hard place, and it's just so painful to watch him go through his life between the vice grip of these drugs. Well, he winds up getting another scholarship and he goes to Pitt. But anyway, what's really interesting is that this series just aired last week, and here we are, we're going through all this lion symbolism right now. Of course, the name of the team is the Lions, East Mississippi Lions. So I'm sure that over the course of the next few weeks, that the school itself will receive quite a bit of promotion, and the series will get a lot of buzz. I think it's really worth watching if you hate football, but you are really kind of hooked on human stories, some of which are kind of hard to deal with. I highly recommend it. One of the stories involves a young guy by the name of DeAndre Johnson. And this guy was all Mr. Football everything in Florida. He got a scholarship to Florida State, 17 years old. I mean, he was like state champion. He was everything, this guy. He was 17 years old. He went to a bar. He got into a hassle with a girl, and he hit her. Caught on videotape. Lost his scholarship, bounced around. Where does he wind up? He winds up at East Mississippi Community College. And he has an amazing season. But guess what? Nobody will touch him. Nope. Nobody will touch him. Just like Ray Rice, he is marked with a scarlet letter. But there's one guy who finally crosses a line and gives him a scholarship to Florida Atlantic, and that's Lane Kiffin. Now, again, in the series, you watch this guy, he's full of remorse, he's turned his life around, playing great, he's exhibiting leadership skills, but in our society, It's right up there, and for good reason too. I mean, it's we can't condone any violence towards women. I mean, that's just not in the discussion. But what is in the discussion is at some point people have atoned for their past sins, and America. And this is what he says. He says America loves a comeback story. That's what he said. America loves to give people a second chance. Well, he's on life support with his second chance. But that's always been part of who we are. Speaking of America, we're going to talk about America tonight and the Great Eclipse coming up. Some interesting findings. So we've got Mars here. We've got the Moon in Leo, Mars in Leo, new Moon. I mean, look, I think on a new Moon in Leo and Mars in Leo, we've got the Sun in Leo. I mean, all three of them are right there, really close, bundled up. I would say that this is a time for some kind of celebration. Some sort of moment where you can be enthusiastic about your life and about whatever it is that you have, right? I mean, look, we all have something to be grateful for. We all do. I mean, look, I've got issues with my lower back, but guess what? I'm grateful for the fact that I can, get up and walk around and do things without having to be completely sidelined by being in some sort of a wheelchair. I mean, so, there's always something to be grateful for. There's always something to open the heart for. And when we have these three planets right here at the beginning of the week with a lot of really electric and passionate energy, it's, in a lot of ways we cannot be determined by the situation that we're in. And I'm talking collectively here. Like so if things are going off the rail for the Trump administration, and quite frankly I think they are, on the left you're probably gleeful. You're like, oh yeah, this is great, this is great. We got these guys on the ropes. Well, don't get too used to that, okay? Because that could change. And that could change 3 days from now, 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now. And, we've seen this happen now. We're in this period of tremendous flux. So, if you're on the left and you're thinking, this is fantastic, and you're having spoonfuls of Schadenfreude every morning with your cornflakes, I would cool your jets a little bit. And if you're on the right or you're looking at this whole piece around Trump as just a complete and utter witch hunt, and feeling demoralized in some ways by how it's all being handled, it's like on the other hand, this could also change quite rapidly, and we can't necessarily allow these outer circumstances to dictate our inner life. This is really what I'm talking about. And it's always good to check in to see what's going on, to unravel things, unwind things, practice our discernment. But at the end of the day, if we're always going to sort of pin our tail or pin our true north onto what's happening out there, we'll be sorely disappointed again and again and again, because we know that the world is ephemeral. It changes from all the time. All the time. So here at the beginning of the week, we've got all this Leo. Get excited, get aroused, be happy, bang your drum, do something creative, set something in motion, right? Set something. Let's look at a full 6-month cycle where we have the new moon in Leo. When's the next full moon going to be in Leo? It's going to be in February. So what can you start now creatively for yourself that culminates in 6 months? That's a question mark, right? Question mark. So keep that in mind as we move into this week, as we move into a time and a period where it may seem quite desultory, or on the other hand, if you're really into sort of the short-lived toxicity of revenge, remember that too. Maybe you don't want to really define yourself along those lines either, because as we know, this game shifts and pivots all the time, all the time. I want to get into a few other aspects here. And this happens, so let's see, the full moon is going to be at Leo 11. And it is, the Sabian symbol for that is children playing a swing, hanging from the branches of a huge oak tree. I think that this is a pretty interesting symbol. It is the power of tradition as it shelters the beginnings of individual self-expression, what we were just talking about. The beginnings of individual self-expression. I'm going to read you a little bit here from Dane Rudhyar. This is the keynote, the power of tradition as it shelters the beginnings of individual expression. The great tradition of mankind has been symbolized by a vast tree, every spiritual teacher being one of its many branches, issuing from the one trunk of a primordial revelation. As man begins his spiritual journey, he is like a child in a state of excitement, playing with rhythmic up and down moods. He plays with words and concepts which hang from the branches of the tradition. And often, the whole quest is mainly a game for him, yet he is securely held by the tree, protected by its foliage from two great burning lights. This begins the 27th fivefold sequence of symbols. It deals essentially with the release of emotional intensity at various levels of the individualized consciousness. As it reacts to the newly developed potentialities of the mind, we are dealing at this first stage with spontaneous activities of the innocent mind. This is exactly what we're talking about here with this new moon in Leo, with Mars in Leo, the sun in Leo. Spontaneous activity of the innocent mind. You know, it's really easy to get all wound up and coiled up about the events, the news of the world, and yet there is something else that ticks in our heart, that beats inside of us, and that is vision and creativity and play and joy. And here we are at the first part of this week, starting off on Sunday with the Sun, Moon, Mars conjunction. It is time. It is time to allow yourself to peel back the layers of cynicism and doubt and indulge in a little bit of innocent, playful, fun, spontaneous creativity. It's like little miracles. Pass them along this week. We got a Mercury retrograde coming up. That's part of this summer's forecast. We have Mercury retrograde on the 13th of August. It's interesting because the full moon is at 11, and we also have that the full moon is, well, it's going to go through the first few stages of the first degrees, but it's also Mercury retrograde is at 11 degrees Leo. And the shadow period is the 26th of this month to the 20th of September, because we're going to have 8/13, and then 3 weeks, and then we go out to the 20th of September. So we're getting ready to enter the shadow period of Mercury retrograde. And that'll be interesting. It starts at 11 Leo, and it goes back into Cancer. So we'll revisit some Mercury Cancer issues with Mercury retrograde. Let me throw up a little image of Mercury, shall we? Let's give you some Mercuryism. Let's see what we have here. Image 150. I thought this was a pretty good Mercury retrograde image. There we go. I love this. He's not really retrograde. It's really hard to find a Mercury running backwards. Of course, he's Hermes. A trickster god. Wings on his heels, wings on his head. No doubt one of the fallen angels. No, I'm kidding, but maybe not so much. But there's Mercury in all of his glory. And that Mercury retrograde period, just giving you a heads up. And it's interesting because it's swinging between Leo and Cancer and Leo. So we're dealing with matters of the heart. We're dealing with matters of creativity. We're dealing with children. If we want to launch that up into the sort of the marquee of the night, children, Chester Bennington, Chris Cornell, all the other children, and I don't want to say childlike, but material around children that are associated with some of the really dark and completely tragic and heavy material that's been coming up for this last year. I mean, clearly since WikiLeaks, a lot of this stuff has just been launched into the public domain, center stage. But this goes back a long ways. And when Saturn was in Scorpio, this is when it all really started to rear its ugly head. And of course, Jerry Sandusky and a lot of the Jimmy Savile dark revelations. So we're going to have this Mercury retrograde, Leo, Cancer, back to Leo. And I wonder if we're going to see more arrests. It's interesting now. Trump is turning on Jeff Sessions. And I wonder why he's turning on Sessions. And even people like Tucker Carlson are asking the same thing. Why is he turning on Jeff? And by the way, why is Trump going to the New York Times and giving them an interview, like a full-on interview? And the Times is using the material against Trump. I mean, it's kind of like mind-blowing, to be honest with you. I knew that with that Sun-Uranus conjunction, with the true node in Gemini, that he would be unpredictable, but his impulse control is almost non-existent. I mean, it's pretty bad, I have to say. Now, some of it may be used with some goal in mind. I don't know, to throw a chaos bomb into the room, a chaos smoke bomb into the room. I don't know. But his impulse control is not great. So anyway, we've got this Mercury retrograde coming up. You know the dates, how it relates to you. Find out where Leo is in your chart. Look at where 11 degrees Leo is in your chart and count backwards. Because that Mercury retrograde, let me get into the ephemeris here, is, let's see what we got here. All right. So, okay, so Mercury goes retrograde at on the 13th at 11, and it goes, what do we have here? Okay, hold on. All right, my bad. Mercury goes retrograde in Virgo. Virgo. We have a Mercury retrograde alert. It's in Virgo at 11 degrees. Virgo at 11 degrees, and that's on the 13th. So it goes back into Leo, not Cancer, and that is, goes all the way back to 28 Leo, which puts it right on Trump's ascendant. That should be interesting. And then it goes direct, finally, it goes direct on the 5th of September, and then we have that shadow period until the 20th. So this is interesting. It goes Virgo to Leo. But you don't want to do any contract signing with Mercury and Virgo retrograde. You want to take care of that business. What else do we have coming up for you during this summertime period? Let's see what else. So we have Mars in Leo. We talked about that. Mars will be in Leo until the 6th of September. So it's going to be part of that eclipse energy. And then on the 6th of September, Mars goes into Virgo. And we've got another pretty big period coming up on the 23rd of September. I might talk about that next week. That's a big one. And then we have Venus. It goes into Cancer on the 1st of August, and it's going to be in Cancer until the 27th. I really like Venus in Cancer as an aspect. I think it's a wonderful aspect in terms of relationships, in terms of bonding, in terms of connecting at a deeper emotional level. There's some sentimentality associated with Venus in Cancer, but I like it. I think it's actually a really nice place for Venus. So we're going to get the benefit of that for 26 days. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be a little more compassionate, a little kinder, maybe a little more caring with one another. And then it goes into Leo after that. And I actually like Venus in Leo too. It's warm. It's fun. It's sexy, right? So we're going to get on a pretty good roll here with Cancer or Venus over the next few months. And I think relationships will benefit from this, from Venus going through Cancer and Leo. And then Virgo, of course, we can step back and become nitpicky about our relationships if we want, or we can just simply find beautiful perfection in one another. Okay, so why don't we get into the topic at hand tonight, which is the eclipse. And I've found some pretty good images for the eclipse. So in order for you to understand the eclipse, I wanted to give you a map of the eclipse. And I'm going to find it right here. Just give me 1 second. So we're going to see the path of the eclipse. And voila, here we go. Let's bring this down a little bit. Can you see it? There it is. Okay, so what we have here is, this is it. That is the arc of the eclipse. And it reaches its apex in Clarksville, Tennessee. So what's interesting about Clarksville is that it's near Nashville. Nashville International Airport serves Clarksville. There's about 100,000 people that live in Clarksville. And there's another Clarksville that shows up in Last Chance U, but it's Clarksville, Mississippi, and it's a very different place. Trust me. Now, I'm not going to make an absolute connection and correlation. However, if you have read Kathy O'Brien's books, or her main book, Transformation of America, she talks about how Nashville and Branson, Missouri, but mostly Nashville, is a center, one of the centers for MK Ultra control through the country and western music business. So here we have Clarksville, not that far from Nashville, Tennessee, but this is the arc of the eclipse. And another interesting place that the eclipse is going to go through is St. Louis, Missouri. Now, it will not, and I looked this up, it will not go through the arch of St. Louis. It'll miss the arch. But one of the areas that it will cross is a place called St. Clair. St. Clair. Ring a bell? St. Clair, Missouri. And what is the name of the family that is most associated with the inception of Freemasonry in Scotland? Yes, it is the St. Clairs. And where is St. Clair located? St. Clair is located on Route 66. It's right there. I know, it's just symbolic eye candy, isn't it? As the eclipse crosses Route 66 in St. Clair, Missouri. I I just had to throw that in there. Why don't we start stacking some images here? Let's do that. So one of the things that I did is I looked at the eclipse with the USA, the eclipse with Trump, and then I created a midpoint composite for all three. So why don't we look at the eclipse and the USA? Let's bring that on. Eclipse USA. Here we go. All right. It's a vertical, but we'll work with it. Okay, so if you can see this now, the inner ring is the eclipse, and this is actually for Clarksville, Tennessee, because it's at the apex. This is 12 noon, right? It's actually 11:57. So we have right here we have the sun, moon, there's the true node, there's the moon in the eclipse point, here's Mars and Mercury, stellium in Leo. Now, this is kind of close in some ways to the U.S. chart, to some extent, right? Now, the U.S. chart, this is the midheaven for the U.S. chart, there's Neptune. So it's about one house behind, right? One sign behind. Now, what's really interesting is that there's going to be a Venus-Mercury conjunction at that time. And what I found to be really interesting was that Sirius will be conjunct the U.S. sun. So the U.S. is on the outer ring, okay? Sirius will be conjunct the U.S. sun at that time. So up until that time, Sirius has been behind the sun, but here it's conjunct the sun. So we have the binary twin in direct communication. So not only with the U.S. sun, so not only do we have the eclipse, but at that point in time, Sirius is eclipsing the U.S. sun. This is really potent stuff. Now, a lot of people are predicting that this is the end of America. This is the end of the USA. This is the end of Trump. This could mean that Trump's children are going to be indicted. By the way, I've been flashing a lot on Trump and the Romanov family. Has anybody else made those connections? Now, Alexander II was born April 29th, so that makes him a Taurus, and we know Trump is a Gemini. But this just feels a lot like 1917, doesn't it, in some ways? And here we are, this is 2017, the 100-year anniversary of the overthrow of the Romanovs and the beginnings of worldwide communism. And don't you think that the leftists don't know this? They know this. This is their year. This is their jubilee for the overthrow of the Romanovs. And what do we have? We have a Romanov-like family in the White House. The only thing that's missing is their version of Rasputin. I mean, maybe that's Steve Bannon. I don't know. Steve Bannon's on, he's on the rings of Saturn right now. He's not doing anything. Anyway, we have Sirius here conjuncting the sun, the U.S. sun. Now, the U.S. moon is in Aquarius, and look at this. What do we have here? We have the south node on the U.S. moon, and we have this opposition, right? This is heavy stuff here. So we have the eclipse in opposition to the U.S. moon in Aquarius. And I wonder what this means. You know, when I see the Aquarian moon in the U.S. chart, I always think in the third house that it's slightly perverse. You know, it's like porn. Because there's something kinky about moon and Aquarius in the third house. It's like voyeuristic. So there's something here that's shining a light, a dark light, the black hole sun on the U.S. moon with the south node in Aquarius here. This is really fascinating stuff. Would this be the exposition or the expose of the dark Aquarian age? Is it the birth, or are we going to unveil it? Will it be unveiled and we'll see it? Is that what's coming? Or will we be able to see it and then unveil it? Maybe that's the point of this eclipse. Somebody sent me a comment on my website, and she says, well, if I was born in raised in a half-empty household, glass half-empty household, and she's trying to see the positives in the eclipse. All the people renting hotel rooms along, these, areas of the United States, which are, like St. Clair, Missouri. There's probably going to be 2 motels in St. Clair, Missouri. I guarantee they'll be full. So for 2 days, maybe St. Clair, Missouri gets a little economic boost. Who knows? But it would be cool to have a documentary and have people. Well, somebody's going to do this, but to have people lined up along that eclipse path in all these different places, and then put all the video together and make a movie out of the eclipse path. That'd be so cool. But the opposition to the U.S. moon is significant, pretty significant. And that, in a lot of ways, is really the biggest sort of energy around the eclipse energy itself. Other than that, what else is it doing? It's sextiling over here to the U.S. Mars, and then there's the inconjunct to the U.S. South Node in Aquarius. Interesting. So the U.S. is going to have its nodal South Node, and it's going to have its nodal return. Wow, that's interesting. I had not factored that. I'm telling you, this pedophilia stuff's going to be blown wide open. I can see this in the chart. It's going to be blown wide open. People, and you know what? It's got to happen. I swear to God, it's got to happen. And it's been a long time coming. Here we have this inconjunct going right down there to the South Node and Pluto. Pluto in Capricorn, South Node in Aquarius. The South Node in Aquarius, man, that's the Achilles heel of the U.S. What is Leo? Leo is individualistic, right? Look at me. Aren't I great? It's sports, it's performing, it's celebrity. And that's where the true node is in the United States chart. It's in Leo. Now, I'm not promoting fake celebrity. Not at all. But I am promoting Leo as a manifestation of the heart, the divine creative spirit, or the spirit of divine creation. I am invoking that. And the South Node, really in Aquarius, is like social Marxism. That's what it is. It's like the dark new age. It's going to get exposed here. I'm telling you. This eclipse is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to it, to be honest with you. I'm looking forward to this eclipse. It's going to be all up in my 9th house. Maybe I'll have some kind of major revelatory moment, or maybe I'll just ascend, who knows. But if we're looking for aspects that are challenging, to me, it is the opposition to the U.S. moon, right there. Right there, and of course, and there's the South Node, just crossing that moon. I think some of that has to do with the fact that maybe people don't feel safe. Look what happened to Justine Demond up in Minneapolis. Minneapolis used to be a nice place. So what about Trump? What's Trump got going on? What does he have going on with this eclipse? Well, funny you should ask. Let's bring him on. And here is the Trump eclipse right there. Bang. Okay. So we're just going to move this over here a little bit, remove this out. And, all right. So, The eclipse is on the inner ring. Trump is on the outer ring. Now what's interesting about this is where it's really hitting him, of course, is his ascendant. Here's Mars, right? There's his Mars. So all the eclipse is just going to hit that Mars. I mean, it's not great. I'm going to tell you right now, it's not great for him. However, that said, outside of the eclipse, there's also a trine down here to his south node and his moon. It's interesting. Something about foreign governments actually being involved in this eclipse energy. Now, it's not necessarily bad. I mean, but there's some level here with this. We have transiting Saturn right there on Trump's south node and his moon. Boy, that's a tough transit. It's been there for a while. Right, troubles at home, troubles abroad, although he may find support in places away from his home. But it's also on his south node. So he's trying to do the Sagittarius thing. And with the moon making America great again, the moon is really sentimental. But Saturn has been blocking that. In some ways that could be things like the judiciary and perhaps the deep state to some degree. But here, in this instance, he's actually getting some support. Now, we can see that where is transiting Saturn here? Well, it would be there. But no, transiting Saturn would be here. But it's really connecting in with Trump's true node and his south node. So there's something supportive, even in a strange way, about the eclipse. But I would say that he's in jeopardy with all this. It's sort of like the forces of Sauron have come together here on the ascendant, Trump's ascendant. And he's been dealing with this opposition. You see that opposition? Pretty much since he's been in the presidency. Saturn-Sun opposition is not great. If he's going to make it through the eclipse, once Saturn moves into Capricorn and gets out of this opposition with his Sun, Uranus, and gets off of his moon, you'll see perhaps a more effective president if he moves through this gauntlet. And this is going to be a very tricky time for him and for us as a country. Okay, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to put it all together. So what happens if we use a midpoint composite and we bring Trump and the United States and the eclipse together? Here's the answer to that question. It's right here. Let's cover this up a little bit. So if we combine all three in a midpoint composite, we get a mystic rectangle. And we have the stellium of planets all up here at the roof of the chart. 8th house, 9th house, 10th house. We have Libra on the ascendant, which is not necessarily a bad ascendant per se. We have a Pluto moon conjunction with Uranus in opposition. 1 square Saturn to Sun Venus. So the overwhelming energy of all three events combined into a triple midpoint composite chart actually is pretty interesting. Because what we're getting here is we're getting the true node right on the midheaven in Cancer. There's the Sun. We have a Sun-Venus conjunction. We have Sun conjunct the true node, and we have a midheaven of 1 Leo, 1 degree Leo. Here's Mars, here's Mercury. Of course, Mars is aggressive, at that position, but it's also in trine with Neptune and Pluto and the Moon. It's very interesting. I like this chart. When you combine the U.S. chart, Trump's chart, and the eclipse chart, if there's any positivity, it's certainly in this chart. Now, we do have some conflicting energies here. We have Saturn square to the Sun and Saturn square to Venus. Saturn hidden in the 12th house. Here we have, potentially again, if we look at Saturn as being hierarchical forces of the planet, Saturn in the 12th house is alienation. Saturn in the 12th house can be isolation. Saturn in the 12th house can also be a real indicator of spiritual growth. Squaring off against Cancer. What's going to matter more? Is it going to be the needs of the people, right, in an elevated state? Potentially, let's just try this on for size. Let's have a what-if moment, okay? Let's have a glass half full moment. What if through the eclipse, we're actually brought together? Because this is an event that we're all going to be witnessing and participating in to some degree, right? What if it brought us all together? What if we had, during this eclipse, something profound, some kind of epiphany that would communicate to us that we're all connected? Because the ninth house is pretty spiritual, to be honest with you. It's a house of higher consciousness. And here we have the true no, the Sun, and Venus, and then there's Sirius right there, conjunct Venus, sextiling to Uranus, making it fast, making it sudden. Uranus in the 8th house, this sort of dilithium crystal of warp speed transformation. Let's hold that in our vision. This is interesting. I'm gonna put this chart up on my site and up on Facebook. This is the chart to look at, and even with Jupiter in the 11th house there, that's group consciousness, right? And there's Jupiter in Virgo. Yeah, it squares Pluto, squares the Moon, but Jupiter squares not terrible. But what's interesting is the Uranus opposition to Neptune, Pluto, and the Moon. It's like, what do we hold on to, and what do we spin and pivot and have the ability to move towards? There's a letting go in this chart, don't get me wrong, and the letting go is sudden here with the Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Moon opposition. But there's also the potential for something higher to come into play. Now, the mystic rectangle only becomes a mystic rectangle when we include the South Node. When we don't include the South Node, it's a little bit different. But even the South Node is strengthened here in the trine with Uranus and the sextile with Pluto, Moon, Neptune. It's a fascinating chart. So this gives you an idea and an example of where there's some potentiality. Now, yeah, Mars at the midheaven, could it be war? Sure, absolutely. But we have Mars in the midheaven in the eclipse chart anyway at that point in time, right? Now, that would put Trump's Sun, well, this is just the composite, because Trump is in here. Trump's right there in that composite Sun in the 9th house. I like that 9th house. Then we have Chiron down in the 4th in Aquarius. That's interesting. Maybe it's time for a change with how we live. If I combine all three, the only thing that really is kind of mind-blowing here is this Uranus opposition. And it has, to me, it's about a very fast pivot and a very quick letting go of something. But then there's something higher, there's something greater that comes out of this. It's really interesting. Let's hold a positive space for the eclipse. All right, so I'm going to take some of these images away. And let's get rid of that one. There we go. Yep. And that one. Yep. And this one. Here we go. All right. And we get rid of that one. Hey, it's me again. All right, well, I'm only going to talk here for a minute or two more because I have to get up early and get on my plane, go on vacation. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I said this on Friday's show. I have a special for first-time people who want to be, who have wanted to become clients or have a session. I'm taking $30 off of my normal session fee. So if you want to do a 1 hour reading with me, that's $30 less than my normal fee, which is $155, so that's $125. And if you are somebody who has been a client of mine, I'm also offering a half off one reading for two. So if you get one reading, you want to get a second reading, that's half off. You can contact me for both of those. Let me check in with YouTube here. I haven't looked at all to see how the streaming is going. Let's find out. How's the streaming, live streaming checklist? Not quite. Traditional Mercury. But Moon in Sagittarius, third house, trining Venus in Cancer. That's good. Really. Hey, how are we doing here on the stream? Is it good? Is it good? Is it good? Is it good? Moon in Asparagus. Mercury retrograde from last summer was really awful. I do agree with you, Daniel. That was a rough one. Yes, the show is real. Yes, Last Chance U is real. When you go to Florida Atlantic for Muddy Yoga, yeah, go say hi to Lane Kiffin down there. All right. Hey, I'm out of here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening, watching, doing all the things that we do here on the 11th house. And I'll be with Randy Moggins and Emily Moyer on Tuesday night. That's the one thing I'm going to be doing on my vacation. Other than that, I am chilling. I'm chilling on the sand and the sun on my back. This is Robert Phoenix. Have a great, great week. And I'll see you guys next Sunday, hopefully. All right, if I'm back. Okay, take care.